You're good.
Today I'm here at Wood Creek Farms with Tom Perry. And Tom, I want to know how you're doing today.
I'm doing good, Mary. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. And
our families, our families go back a long way.
I'm Mary Dallenbach Hill, and I'm doing video interviews with historical heritage here in Patrick County. And that is why I'm talking to Tom Perry today. We know he's an author and other things too, probably that I don't know a lot about, but I definitely know he's an author and he is well versed in our history. So, what is your full name?
I'm Thomas David Perry. I'm named for my mother's grandfather.
So that was the reason you feel like that you were given that name?
Yeah, because he was David Thomas Hobbs, and I'm Thomas David Perry.
Okay. Do you want to say a little bit about your dad being the school teacher and your mom?
Well, my mom and dad came to Ararat about 1959. My dad was principal and teacher for 30 years in Patrick County. My mother worked for Dr. Tullidge in Clawville for about a decade, and then she went to work at Quality Meals, which became Cross Creek Apparel, and she worked there almost 40 years.
Oh.
She wasn't in charge of shipping, but I think she ran the shipping department. She shipped a lot of golf shirts, and she had done that. I realized recently she had done that for a decade at Georgia Pacific in Georgia before Daddy married her.
Okay.
So she'd been in the shipping thing for a long, long time.
Well, you know your dad was principal when I was going to Blue Ridge Elementary, which it was then Blue Ridge High School.
Yeah.
And he coached us sometimes like assistant, but he was mostly the male coach, for the male. He was the coach for the boys.
Yeah.
And Mr. George, Conrad George George was the female. But once in a while, Mr. Perry did coach us some. So.
Yeah.
And he was also several of my class instructors.
Social studies, history, something like that.
Several of them.
Yeah.
And he always seemed like he made everything interesting. I mean, he got your attention before he started the class.
Yeah.
I thought he was really good.
He passed away in December, and I can't tell you how many people I've had come up to me and tell me stories about how he impacted their lives in some way.
Yeah.
A lot of it sports related. Guys wouldn't be able to play baseball or stuff if he hadn't have drove them home after practice and this sort of thing. So I don't know that he ever realized how much impact he had on other people's lives.
See, one thing that stood out was in the grade level, we all had all female teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we got to high school, Mr. George and Mr. Perry were male teachers. And see, that was something new.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I felt about it.
He was very athletic. He was very athletic. He stayed pretty slim well into his 40s. So he loved sports. He loved baseball especially.
So he was an all-round instructor. I mean, because he could coach.
Yeah, he played. He was really good.
And be the teacher in the classroom.
Yeah, he was a really good baseball player. He was a single-digit handicap in golf too. He'd take your money if you played golf with him.
Yeah. What do you remember about growing up, other than you were telling me about your parents moving to Ararat and your mother working? And
well,
I'm asking about you personally.
Yeah, I grew up in 2 or 3 houses around, all within almost sight of the Ruritan building, and I was the only child, so it was sometimes it was lonesome, and sometimes it wasn't. I had a lot of friends, but they all lived a mile away or something, so you had to invent things for yourself to do. I think only children have to do that. And my mother was really instrumental getting me reading, getting me interested in history, and she really did that. Like I said, my father was much more into athletics and things, playing golf. But my mother was the one who really got me interested in history. I used to love to read history. I still love to read history and listen to history. I listen to a lot of books now.
I believe you told me earlier than when we spoke that your mother actually got you interested in the Stuarts by taking you down
Yeah.
to Icy and George Albert Brown
She said when
farm.
I was about 9 or 10 years old that I just became obsessed with the Virginia Highway historic marker that was there. It said Stewart's birthplace. Had a couple of bullet holes in it by then, and she said that I just drove her crazy, as only a boy can with his mother. What's out there? Can we stop? Can we go out there? This kind of thing, you know. And she said that finally she got so tired of me asking that she took me to Shug and Icy,
Yeah.
George Elbert Shug Brown and Icy Bowman Brown,
Right.
and left me with them one day and told Icy when she came back that she wanted me to know everything she did.
Oh my goodness.
What my mother, I don't think, realized was she was creating a monster by doing that, because Icy had all these scrapbooks about the farm and about Jeb Stewart. You walked in their house, Jeb Stewart was sitting, there's a picture of him sitting on the coffee table like he was a member of the family. And Shug would take me out there and walk me around, show me what he knew and what things he thought were things. And he knew
There was some
graveyard,
graveyard.
well, all kinds of stuff. That pretty much the archaeology, when they did it out there, was he was pretty right on with most of what he said. I mean, but you know, that was his dream to see something be done with that place, and I think he kind of transferred that to me in a weird sort of way, and it kind of became my obsession too. But that's how it started. Mama just literally left me with Icy one day and said, "Tell him everything you know."
Well, I don't think she created the monster. I think she created a good an individual that likes history of the area.
Yeah.
What did you have a job or
Well,
something to do when you grew up?
I worked in computers for 30 years. I worked doing systems administration, networking, stuff like that. I worked at places like Insteel in Mount Airy and Cross Creek Apparel, where my mother worked. Worked for Burlington Industries for a while, Wachovia. I've done contract work. So I did that for 30 years, where I did computer work. But, you know, my first job was in a tobacco field, probably like your first job was in a tobacco field. Mine was too. And, you know, growing up in Iraq, you could work in tobacco from the time you got big enough to, you know, handle yourself. You could work in the tobacco, and that's what a lot of us did. And I worked in tobacco until I was 16. When I got my driver's license, then I went to Mount Airy and got me a job in the textile mill and all that sort of thing, and did that all through high school and into college a little bit. But you know, I'm sure like you and your family, tobacco was the thing. And we all worked in tobacco. You could work every day if you wanted to.
Yeah, all the farms had a little tobacco, a lot more than others.
And I worked for two or three of your brothers, George and Walter. I worked for the Gwynns that were engraved. I think I worked for Joe Bill Brown a little bit, but mostly the Gwynns. And I said Dave Smith got me working for George, and we did all that. And you know, looking back on it, it was hard work. But gosh, what a way to grow up!
Well, may I ask, when you did work for George, was that when he was living over where the Letcher grave site is? And
yes.
Did you talk about that while you were there with George? Did you realize that you were on that property?
Oh yeah.
That belonged to.
You realize you were on the Stewart property. I hadn't really researched it. Now this is when you're a teenage boy.
Right.
But George, I think George probably lived in the White House that I guess you grew up in.
Yes.
And and then George built the house up on the hill there, going up the Rabbit Ridge. And but no, George I always thought George looked like James Longstreet, the Confederate general.
He had
that long beard and black. And I always thought he looked like James Longstreet. But I do have some funny stories about working for George. But one time, the funniest thing I ever saw, in a way, was we were in the plant beds pulling plants one spring, and one of us came across a big old copperhead snake in the plant bed, and we all jumped out of there and we got that snake out and killed it. It was a copperhead, and we started to go back in. And one of the guys said something like, I've always heard them poisonous snakes travel in pairs. And my neighbor, Brady Walker, who was working with us that day, as I recall, Brady used some colorful adjectives to tell us, yes, they did, and that he had found another one.
Oh.
And Mary, the Bible says that Jesus walked on water. I saw Brady Walker walk across a plant bed that day. I ain't never seen a man move so fast in my life. I mean, it was an enormous copperhead snake. I mean, I couldn't believe how big this thing was. And we got it out and killed it too. what I remember is your brother George saying, "Now, does anybody else have any more comments they want to make before we go back into the plant bed?"
But you know, all the years I helped Daddy as a child, we never saw snakes.
Very seldom.
I
Very
don't ever
seldom.
remember, but I'm thankful too because that would have really been
Yeah,
scary.
but the plant beds are such a low cover thing that they could hide in there and you wouldn't see. But I didn't see a man walk on water. I saw a man walk across the top of the plant bed one day. Get away from that thing. But that's my best George Dillon backstory.
Who was the oldest person you remember knowing and talking to about the area or history or whatever?
Well, there was a couple. One was Miss Aggie King, who kept me in the afternoon sometimes, babysat me while I'm waiting on my dad to come from Red Bank.
Was she still the second grade teacher?
No,
then?
she had retired by then.
Okay,
She had retired.
so she was my second grade teacher.
And she lived right there beside the fire department up there near Boyd's Restaurant.
Right.
And Miss Aggie would keep me. And she was an educated woman. She knew her history and she had traveled some. So she was a good sword. The best one, though, of course, is always Carrie Sue Culler, who lived to be, 107 years old.
Yeah.
And if you want, as Theodore Gwynn would say to me, if I asked him something, I don't know, but let's go ask Carrie Sue, because she had lived here so long and really loved history, loved to talk murder stories too. She loved murder stories, but she had been here. She was born 1907, 8 in there, so she'd been here a long time, and she loved to talk about it. And that's probably the person. She really influenced me. I think she influenced a lot of people.
Well, I guess you realize that she came on from the Boneyard side,
Mhm.
but also her family was into the Pettigos,
Yeah.
which goes all the way back to Doc Pettigo. There was a doctor in their family.
And they were next door neighbors
And
to
her
Jeb
dad
Stewart's
ran
family. Her family was. They were
Okay.
next door neighbors. So she told me a story once about, I think it was her grandmother had gone to school with Jeb Stewart, and there was a little community schoolhouse, and that there's some guy named Monday was the teacher and taught her family and Jeb Stewart's brothers and sisters, and they all went to school together. Now, there's nowhere else in the world I would have ever heard that except from her, because that's not written down anywhere. You're not going to read that in a Jeb Stewart biography. That's just something that she knew, like Icy knew things, and your mother and father knew things because they lived there. So that was a great source. She was really something else.
I believe she told me now, at the end of the road there on Rabbit Ridge, what they call Rabbit Ridge Road now. Carrie Sue lived right across the intersection there in her last days, other than going to the nursing home. But I believe she told me the Jeb Stewart schoolhouse was like here. Her house was here, and she remembered the schoolhouse being here. Not that she lived there when she was a child, but she did remember the real old Jeb Stewart schoolhouse.
Yeah, and she had pictures of it. She had pictures of that, yeah.
And some people call it the Rabbit Ridge School, but she said that she actually remembered the Jeb Stewart.
Yeah, I believe there was a sign above the door that said Jeb Stewart School. Yeah. But she was just unbelievable. She knew all this stuff because she had lived there. So I mean, that's oral history.
And her dad we called him Old Man Joe. I think maybe that's not a proper noun to say, but her dad was the store owner in the area.
Yeah.
And he had the mail. I think the mail came through his little store.
Yeah, it's still going. Not enough storage space. That's why it cut off. But you're good up top. That's all right.
But I can remember him. I remember going to the little store. The
cinder block building.
No. He built that later.
Yeah.
He had an old store, all wood floor and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do remember him.
Yeah.
But I was very small.
Yeah, just like for me.
Cinder block store.
Just like for me, Porter, his son, Porter ran the store when I was a kid, Carrie Sue's brother. And so we would go into what's the Jeb Stewart grocery now. That was Porter Bondurant's store then.
And he called it the Blue View because it's such a beautiful view of the
beautiful view of Groundhog Mountain right there. Yeah. Beautiful view. That's one of my favorite views, I think, everywhere I've ever been.
But I can remember going in the store, and I think I remember crackers being in the barrel, and he had a pickle barrel.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I think that I do actually remember that. And he was good to us kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he at Christmas time he would give us candy,
Yeah.
and you know he was just
And Porter did
he
the
was
exact
really
same thing.
like a jolly, down to earth person.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And Porter did the same thing with us.
Yeah.
He'd give us candy. You go in there, you know, he give you some candy, no charge. And Porter's another one. We're talking about going to talk to the oldest person you know. I go and talk to him
Yeah.
because he was only a couple of years younger than Carrie Sue.
Wow.
And they both lived well. He lived into his 90s and she lived into her hundreds. And they were just a wealth of information.
And people used to go, mostly the men, but the women went some. There was a big stove and a fire, you know, when it was cold, and people would sit around, the men would, and prop their feet up on the stove and just talk and
Tell
shoot
big
about it.
lies. Tell big lies.
Yes, spit food. I mean,
Well, I remember
It was
that. I
wonderful.
remember
to remember all of that. What was important to your family, if you, in
Well,
your opinion,
My
what was important growing up as a child now?
education was important to my family. My mother and father. My father worked in education. My mother had been to school, and you know there was no doubt about it. You know, Tom, you're going to college, and that's just the way it is.
Right.
And you know they pushed it. You know everything was about you getting into college. Everything was you know you work at a job to save money so you can go to college. You keep your grades up so you can get in college. You know, and my father being the principal, if I stepped out of line in any way, manner, shape, or form, he knew about it almost before I knew about it because the teachers would tell him.
Or some of the students.
Well, not the students, the teachers. Teachers,
Okay.
you know, and it was usually like this. It's like, well, Erie, I don't mean to tell you nothing, but Tom, you know, did something. And oh boy, when he got home, I got the old, you got to set an example speech. Oh my goodness, I can tell you how many times. And I really wasn't a bad kid, but I got the old, you got to set an example speech. I can tell
Well,
you.
did you feel like he was firm because he knew how important it was?
Yeah, he was
But was
firm.
he a little zealous or over? I mean,
No, my father. I mean,
now that you look back, he probably was.
I got spankings. He was actually much more of a hands off, really. My mother was the one that would invoke on you. You know, if you did something and she didn't like it, she didn't suffer no fools. My mother was the most gentle Christian woman you ever saw until you riled her up, and then look out.
You have, mothers have to make it understood to a child. You know,
Mhm.
this is right, and I have to get you to understand.
Yes,
And she loved you, but she had to correct you.
Yeah, and I was her only child, so she everything was about me.
Right.
And if I messed up, I got it. I mean, I really did. It wasn't a physical abuse, but I would get told the way it was going to be. She had no problems with that.
Have you studied something about Benjamin Franklin? When he
Uh-huh.
grew up, he was like the 10th child of the second wife or something.
Yeah.
And he didn't like working in the candle water. His dad,
So
tallow, candle.
he snuck off and went away.
Well, he would sneak out and go to swimming and all kinds of things, get out with other boys.
Yeah.
But he kept telling his daddy he didn't want to do it. Well, I think his daddy encouraged him to read and be knowledgeable.
Yeah.
That if you have knowledge and that you can not have to work in that kind of a place.
Right.
And Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln, I think both of them were sent out to work, like dig ditches or something, and then they came back and said, I want to go to school. I want to listen to you.
Absolutely.
For why you're telling
But
me.
you know,
because I don't want to dig ditches when I get older.
You know this as good as I do. A couple summers in a tobacco field to do exactly the same
I
thing
was
too.
going to ask you, and that's why you felt, yes, Daddy and Mama, I will go to college.
It was weird because I didn't live on a farm. I didn't necessarily have to go work in a tobacco field. I just did because that's what all the guys and girls I grew up with. Girls were in the tobacco field with us too. I grew up with lots of girls who were just as good in the tobacco field as any of the guys were.
But the spending money was a good reason, wasn't it?
Oh,
to
yeah.
have some change in your pocket
Oh,
and
yeah.
buy whatever you wanted.
I mean, I was working, we all went to work in the textile mills when we were 16 or so. And, you're making the same amount of money that a grown man is. And you're in high school.
Yeah.
So I was able to save a lot of money that I used in college. But it allowed you to, you could go buy you latest 8-track tape or
Yeah.
whatever if you wanted to.
Or just a pair of shoes or jeans or something
You
that
could,
you wanted,
yeah.
maybe necessarily your mom and dad didn't
You
want
could
to buy.
afford to take one of the local girls out to dinner and a
Right.
movie because you had a little money.
Right.
And the thing you learn is their fathers usually, who no father likes a teenage boy showing up to pick up his daughter. But if you had a job and you worked hard, somehow or another her father knew that, and so he cut you a little slack because you weren't a lazy bum. You were actually out there working and doing stuff. So that's. But we didn't think about it. We just did it.
Well, I can remember working and making some money as a
Yeah.
child growing up. So it was nice to have money that you had earned yourself. And Daddy raised us to be independent, and I feel like you were raised to be independent.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they said, I will do it, you will do it, but it was everything you was exposed to.
Yeah, like my mother.
You actually did grow up to be
My mother
independent.
worked. My mother worked, had a full-time job. So if in the summer, if I'm at home, she expected me to clean the house and help her out around the house. If she came home, the dishes weren't washed, and you hadn't vacuumed the carpet or something, you heard about it. You heard about it, and she she kind of raised me to be the way they do girls now, in a way, to be independent and do my own thing, and you don't have to. You don't sit on your butt. You get up and do something when it's done. Because I got a job, and you're sitting here all day, so you need to do it.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's like work ethic. She
Yeah.
was instilling into you
Absolutely.
work ethic.
Absolutely.
Why do you feel like your story is important to history?
Well, I don't know that my story so much is important is that though what I do is I'm preserving history. I think
Right.
that's the thing that I really have done is I've done everything from the Jeb Stuart birthplace. I've interviewed Vietnam vets. I've tried to write down a lot of the things that I learned growing up about the history of where we grew up, and that's the thing.
Can you tell me when you started the history, gaining the knowledge and writing?
Oh,
or
I
whatever?
started young. I mean, I can remember as a 19-year-old boy just being obsessed with Thomas Jefferson. I just loved Thomas
Yeah.
Jefferson. And my mother would take me to Monticello to visit and things like that.
Wonderful.
So he was my first kind of historical hero.
Yeah.
Jeb Stuart's never really so much been a hero of mine as that Jeb Stuart is in our neighborhood,
Right.
and we
Stood
need.
out.
He stood out. He's by far the most important historical person. Now, you may not like what he believed in or whatever, but he was a man living 150 years ago, and he's important. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with him. His history is important. And I think when I was in my mid-20s, I started to realize how big a deal he really was.
Yeah.
And I don't think we around here really knew that. And so with the birthplace, I realized, well, man, we got a guy who got killed in the Revolution over here, near where the house you grew up in. And then we got his great grandson, who ends up being a major general and just about changed the course of the history of this country in a way. You may not like that, but that's the truth. He did. So I think, the thing I think I'm proud of is that, I've helped preserve some of this stuff because there's nothing, Mary, that makes me happier than to have a teenage kid, boy or girl, walk up to me and tell me that they had read one of my books and start quizzing me about it. That just makes my day. Because, we think that, kids are sorry and don't do this and don't do that, but there are some great kids out there who do read and do pay attention to this stuff. And that just tickles me to death to have one come up to me like that.
Sure. What would you like to be remembered for most? What you've done, the research, your books, or
Well, I think the thing I'd like to be remembered for is that I preserved history. I think that
local.
local and Jeb, I've done some stuff with Jeb Stuart that is not just local. I get recognized all over the country because I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And there's people who, I've spent my whole adult life with Jeb Stuart in a weird sort of way. I really have.
Yeah.
I've read every letter he ever wrote. I know everything that you can possibly know about him. When people write books about Jeb Stuart, they contact me and ask for help,
Yeah.
which I take to be a great compliment. You know, it's not bragging. That's just the truth. Every major biographer of Jeb Stuart in the last 20 years has contacted me and asked me to help them, and I do. I do.
Can you give your expert opinion? Jeb went to West Point. He was a dedicated federal officer starting out at West Point. He loved the United States. He was in the United States military.
He sure was. 7 years.
Now,
11.
Can you, I mean, I have my opinion, but can you elaborate on, like, when the Civil War came, why did he stay?
Sure.
Why did he say, I'm going to be with the Civil War on the South, not with the North, even though I'm a federal officer in the military?
The old traitor question is what they call that, what I call that. You know, today you'll see all kinds of people say that, you know, somebody like Jeb Stuart's a traitor to his country. Well, you got to remember this. When the Constitution of the United States was written in 1787, Jeb Stuart's family had been in Virginia for almost 300 years. Almost 300 years. And this isn't the way we think about things. We think about that our country is the United States of America. Jeb Stuart thought of his country as being Virginia.
Or colony.
Commonwealth of Virginia. And his family, that's the way they thought. The United States was not necessarily his country. He just didn't view it that way. And of course, this is going back to this thing where you project our views on a man who lived 150 years ago. You aren't in his shoes.
Right.
If he had, and there were guys who fought for the United States who were from Virginia, but most of them went with the South. And Stuart went with the South, and you can read it in his letters because he identified as a Virginian. And if Virginia left the Union, he believed that then he had a right to leave the Union and to fight against the Union. And he waited until he knew what Virginia was going to do in early 1861. He didn't resign until May of 61, just a month or two ahead of the first battle of Manassas, which he was at. But he was a Virginian first, and he was in the United States of America second. And he was in the U.S. Army for 7 years. He was, if you count West Point, 11 years.
Yeah.
And he was very highly educated. But to go against his state and really going against his family, he couldn't do that. And some of them did, but he couldn't.
Well, now, it's my understanding Robert E. Lee was the same way.
Robert E. Lee was exactly the same.
He went to West Point. He was a federal officer. He loved the country, but he was a Virginia person.
And, you know, I'm sure Stuart and Lee agonized over that.
Yeah.
Because, you know that if you do this, you know, you're going to change your life. And, you know, it cost Jeb Stuart his life. He got killed because he made that decision. But I don't think he ever thought he made the wrong decision. And that's his viewpoint, not our viewpoint. So, you know, people today will call him a traitor because he left the United States. But he didn't view it that way because he didn't think the United States was his country. He thought Virginia was his country. And, I mean, you know, I try to look at things not through emotion. Like people today, everything is emotion. You know, they get all mad and fired up about all this stuff. But you got to go back to history and come forward. Yes. You don't start today and look backward. You got to go to be in his shoes. What was he thinking? What was the situation? And come forward. Right. That's how you should view somebody. That's the way we should be viewed in the future, is what do we know right now and how do we feel about it, not how somebody 200 years ago, for 200 years from now, is going to feel about it. Right. So anyway, there's the Gospel of Tom.
Well, what do you think about it? A lot of people in the North knew how important Virginia was. You know why the White House is where the White House is now?
George Washington put the White House there, I expect.
And George Washington was a Virginian, Thomas Jefferson's Virginian, and you go on and on about the Virginians. And the Northern people knew how important Virginia, the state of Virginia, and their people were.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to the White House, where are we going to put our federal capital? Mm-hmm. They thought, well, Virginia, we can't have it all the way in Virginia or South. We can't have it north.
Yeah, and they compromised. And
it's my understanding that Washington took 2 people out on a boat
and
I believe.
Showed them where you wanted to put it. I think.
Who was the treasurer?
Alexander Hamilton.
It was Hamilton and.
Jefferson came to a deal.
Okay.
They actually came to a deal.
This is what I read now.
Yeah.
Washington kept them out on the boat until they came to a decision that they were going to put it where they got it.
Well,
now.
they did come to
It's my understanding.
They came to a decision that they were arguing over the deficit in the government stuff.
Yes.
And one of the things they did is Hamilton will let you do this, but we get to put the capital here.
That's my understanding.
And that's one of the things that they did. And George Washington was all over that. But people want to look back on people in the past, and they look at the way they think, not the way the people in the past thought. And that's how I answer the traitor question.
Well, personally, I'm like you, and I understand that there was a situation going on. I don't know if I should bring up slavery or not. They were raised in slavery. They didn't start out. Washington didn't start out saying, I'm going to buy a slave, or Jefferson didn't say that. I believe the Stuarts had slaves, but all of them were further down the line. They never said, I want it, I'm going to do it, and did it. It was, they were born into the families that did it.
And a lot of them,
and I understand
get rid of slavery, to sell your slaves, whatever, is almost economic suicide, because you've come to depend on slave labor for your livelihood. Now, there were people who did free their slaves and things, but you got to think about it again from their point of view. If Jeb Stuart's daddy freed his 30 slaves, whatever, then he has no one to work his farm, and they will starve to death probably, because they're so used to that kind of thing. Now, I don't mean it's right, but in their worldview, it was legal. When Abraham Lincoln became president of the United States, there was not a thing he could do about slavery. The only way he was able to do anything about slavery was when the Southerners fired on a federal facility. He then used that, as a war powers thing. The Emancipation Proclamation is a war powers act. It'd be like if Joe Biden signed an executive order today about something. It was the same thing. Lincoln, I think, was very worried that it wouldn't hold up in court, that if it actually got to the Supreme Court, that they'd shoot it down and he wouldn't be freeing any slaves. So that's why he went and did the 13th Amendment, which is that Steven Spielberg movie, Lincoln, about how they got the 13th Amendment done, which did end slavery, not the Emancipation Proclamation. The 13th Amendment ended slavery.
It was, to me, my understanding, it was like slow steps. They started to do a little here and a little there, and
Well, they did, but Lincoln, once he got it, he went sledgehammer. There wasn't no gradual. It was, we're going to do the 13th Amendment, and boom, that's the end of slavery. But he's a president in the middle of a war. Presidents in the middle of a war can do things that normally you would never dream of doing, and that's what he did. But the Emancipation Proclamation really didn't free any slaves. It's the 13th Amendment that frees the slaves in this country.
If you felt like, what wisdom would you pass on right now from all of what you've learned and grew up in and experienced with your travels, your books, and you've met a lot of interesting and famous people too. So.
I always tell this is, find the oldest person in your community, go talk to them. You'll learn more that than you probably ever will in a history class in school. It will be a little different history, but it'll be history. That I tell people, find the oldest person, go find your grandparents and talk to them, because I promise you one day you're going to wish you had, and you will regret it if you don't. You really will. And the other thing I'd say to people is, don't get so emotional about this stuff. You're not a slave owner, Think about the way those people had to live and the way their lives were, not the way your lives are. Because, this is the greatest country I think that's ever been on earth.
Yeah.
And we got it made in this country. And I don't think people realize how much they got it made sometime. Me and you are free to sit here and do and talk and, do this. In a lot of countries, you can't even talk about history because that doesn't meet the party line or whatever. And in this country, that we can do that. And there's a lot of things that I don't like about this country, but this is still the greatest country I think's ever been.
And
Ever
book,
been.
and books. Some countries you can't write books about the history, and
No.
you can't.
No.
I mean, people have actually been
And,
executed for writing books.
people in this country have a right to protest and do whatever they want. They also have a right to get the repercussions from that. If you do that, you realize that just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that I have to like it or that you won't have repercussions from that. But you have the right to do it. There's nobody in this right now in this country is going to keep you from saying what you think. And they may not agree with you. They may call you bad names because you do it, but you got a right to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very unusual if you read the history of this world that you're able to do that.
And what are you most thankful for? If I ask you that question.
Well, I'm thankful I'm still alive. I've had 2 bouts of cancer, and I'm still here. I'm still healthy. You should never not underestimate your health.
Yeah.
I think you should take care of yourself. Before you got here today, I walked 2 miles. I walked out to the road and back.
Wow.
I do that here at Wolf Creek. But it's that's the thing is you'd appreciate what you got and who you know. I lost my parents both in the last year, and I've just been amazed at the outpouring aimed at me because of that.
Wow.
And the stories that people have come up and told me about both of them that I would have never known otherwise, and how many lives they touched that I'm sure they didn't realize either. But you should be nice to people. It ain't that hard to be nice to people and appreciate what you got, because I promise you one day you're going to lose it.
Well, Tom, I really enjoyed talking to you today, and I didn't know if you wanted to mention why we're meeting here at Wolf Creek. Is this your hideout to do some writing?
I do.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, we can talk about it. Gary and Cindy Hoback own this place, and a couple times a year they will go visit their family. And I come up here and I house sit. And I've got this whole place to myself: 2 dogs, 2 cats, a herd of cattle, a swimming pool, a pond. It's paradise. And I do a lot of writing. I plan it so that when I get here, I'm ready to go. I've done research and work on things. And I will sit here for a week at a time and just write and think. And it's great. It's solitude. They're very nice to me. Gary and Cindy are, and we. If you've never heard me and Gary Hoback have a conversation, you haven't lived, because he's very interested. They're very interested in the history because they moved into Ararat too, like my parents did, and it's a lot of fun here. It really is.
Well, we could back up. I think sometime in the past you had mentioned to me about Theodore Gwynn and you meeting Dr. Gerald, and that he was in the Marine Corps, and some of the tales that Theodore could tell.
Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying.
And I didn't know about it.
Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying to you about how find the oldest person in the community and go talk to him.
Yes.
Well, Theodore was like a second father to me. I grew up with his kids, Teddy and Ann, and I worked in tobacco with them, and I grew up with them.
Yes.
What the story supposedly was, my mother went back to work, and Bertie Gwynn kept me some. So when Teddy comes home from the hospital, he's born 6 months later. There I am already.
Yeah.
And so Theodore was just a tremendous resource for me growing up, because he knew everybody. He was the mailman. He knew the history and loved to talk about it. Well, in World War II, he had been in the United States Navy. He had been on the USS Princeton and the Atlantic, an aircraft carrier, which is not the glamour spot like the Pacific is.
Right.
You know how you Marines are in the Pacific and all that kind of thing. Well, Dr. Gerald and Theodore grew up together, went to high school together. When the war started, they both went off into the military. Gerald went to the Marines and became a medic, and Theodore was in the Atlantic on an aircraft carrier. So Theodore would go down and visit Dr. Gerald, and I'd go with him sometimes. And I would just sit there and I would listen.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of, I don't know it's like this view, but a lot of times military people don't talk to anybody about what they did or saw except with other military
Right,
people.
that is correct.
And Theodore and Dr. Gerald had seen it. Dr. Gerald had really seen it. He had been a Marine medic, so he knew about the horror of World War II. And I would just sit and listen to him. Well, Eric used to give me a hard time because I went to Virginia Tech and he went to UVA. We had a little back and forth, with that.
Are you saying Eric, Dr. Gerald?
Dr. Gerald went to, I call him Eric
Yeah,
because
okay.
Dr. Gerald went to UVA and I went to Virginia Tech, so we'd have a little back and forth fun with one another. But, I remember one day just vividly, he's sitting there talking to Theodore and he looks over at me and he says, well, Tom, I was over in Iwo Jima. And I just looked at him and I said, really, Doc, you were on Iwo Jima? And he says to me, yeah, I saw both flag raisings on Mount Suribachi. Well, either he had read a lot about it or he was really there, because very few people realized there were 2 flag raisings on Mount Suribachi. And it's like the Marine Corps monument at Arlington. That's what they're doing. They're putting the flag in on Mount Suribachi. So he's telling me all about that one day with Theodore. And I think that's the day I realized, man, these 2 guys, they really did see it. I mean, Iwo Jima would be one of the most awful places. If you were a Marine medic and you're taking care of people who are hurt and wounded, that's not going to be a pleasant experience.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back, and was just a good old country doctor, and you would never have known the things that he had seen. But the only way I would have probably ever heard him talk about that is if I hadn't gone with Theodore.
Absolutely, because I didn't even know he'd been in the military, let alone the Marine Corps, and been in Iwo Jima. Yeah. Now, he delivered my first child, and guess what? I named my first son Clint Eric Hill because of Dr. Gerald.
Yeah, Dr. Gerald.
And my sister Ruby named her first child Eric.
Yeah, Dr. Gerald was a great man. He really was. And, he didn't think that. He didn't, but he and Theodore, they were the greatest generation people. They really saw it. They saved the world from fascism and all sorts of things, and lived to tell about it.
Yeah. See, my dad was in World War II, but he was a cook.
Yeah.
And he did ride on the ships and everything when they were moving troops and all. But to my knowledge, I never heard him talk about any action, like he was in any danger or anything. I mean, he was on the ships being transported, and they could have blown the ship. But you understand what I'm saying. He definitely wasn't at Iwo Jima out there on the...
I'll tell you another story relating to this thing. Is next door to me growing up was Zeb Scales. He was Zeb Stewart Scales, not Jeb Stewart Scales, but Zeb Stewart Scales. Right. Well, Zeb had been in Korea as an artilleryman, and he had been in Vietnam as military police. Well, I'd never, ever heard him talk about it. After he passed away, I came to realize that he was probably the most decorated non-commissioned soldier ever to come out of Patrick County. And he had Bronze Star, I think he had a Silver Star, Purple Heart. He had a shadow box of medals that was about the most impressive thing I ever saw. I mean,
that's right. Didn't he go all the way up to E9?
He was Command Sergeant Major.
Yes. He wasn't just Sergeant Major. He was Command. So that was even higher than
he did not want to be an officer. He told me.
He could have been, but he didn't want to be.
Yeah. Well,
because of his intelligence.
And because of the things he had done. He was good. Well, 30 years ago when we started the Jeb Stuart birthplace, Jeb Stuart IV came to Ararat. He hadn't been here since he had been a little boy, and he had been a full bird colonel in Vietnam. And he came to Ararat, and I was showing him around Ararat. Now, this is Jeb Stuart's great-grandson, full bird colonel in the United States Army. And we were riding by, and I saw Zeb out in the front yard. If you ever saw Zeb, he always had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth.
I remember him well.
And he
became a
deputy sheriff.
Right.
Well, I saw him, so I pulled in and introduced the two of them. And I said, Zeb Stuart, Jeb Stuart. And 5 minutes later, Mary, I was in Da Nang. They started talking to each other about Vietnam. Now, I had never heard Zeb ever.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was about 30 years old when this happened. And this is 30 years ago when we started the birthplace. And he came down here. And they started talking to each other. And I had never heard Zeb really talk about Vietnam. And he and Colonel Stewart just, like all military men do sometimes, they just bonded. And they just thought it was funny that one of them was named Zeb Stewart and the other was Jeb Stewart. And they just started talking to one another. And I'm not kidding you. 5 minutes later, we were in Vietnam. And they had a great conversation with one
I don't
another.
suppose you recorded that.
Lord, no. What was I wish I'd had a smartphone then got a picture of that or just recorded that. But I don't remember a lot about what they said to each other, but I do remember that they talked about Vietnam almost exclusively. Well, where were you at? Well, I was there, and they would discuss things, and I just amazed because I had never really heard Zeb. I knew Colonel Stewart had been in Vietnam, but he was a transportation officer. He was logistics, moving things, people around. He really kind of probably had an office job. He's not out. And Zeb was military police in Vietnam, so he's not really in combat, but he's probably in danger to a degree. But it was just wonderful to see these two men who had never seen each other before in their lives and probably never saw each other again, just relive their military experience with each other.
Right.
And after Zeb died, we got the bridge over the Dan River named for him because he told me all the time that he helped build that bridge. I helped build that bridge. And so we got a name for him. Now it's the Command Sergeant Major Zeb Stewart Scales Bridge.
Right. Yes, I know exactly where it is.
But so that was next door growing up.
Well, Tom, I really enjoyed talking to you, and you like history, I like history. We could talk all day.
Yeah, we could sit here all day. We'd run out of video stories.
Yeah, the time.
Sit here all day.
Well, I really appreciate your time.
Yes, ma'am. Always good to be with you.
I hope in the future people will review this video and be thankful for it that we took our time and patience to talk to each other, and you did all the things you did, and so there again, this video is for the Patrick County Heritage Project, which was recently started right before the pandemic happened. So
yeah, and they did this years ago. The oral history, they did a similar thing years ago.
Right, we have that. We've listened to it several times.
So that's but that's what you do. You document this stuff.
Right. And it's my understanding that eventually a copy of it will be at Virginia Tech, maybe even at the Homestead, at Reynolds Homestead, and definitely, I believe a copy would be at the Historical Museum in Patrick County, Stewart.
Anyway, thank you, Mary.
Yes, sir.